Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Reginald the Vampire. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So immediately picking up where the last episode left off, Reginald's trying to do his best to avoid being around Sarah, who's like, I know there's something here and we need to kind of talk it out, but he wants to be with her. Obviously, it's the thing he's dreamed of, is what he's, Ted talked about in his mind, but sadly it can't be, especially under these circumstances, and especially because he's so hungry and he doesn't want to hurt her. And at first I was like, oh, he's pouring his heart out. She already left, didn't she? But then I didn't hear any door close, but it's like Maurice got there and made her leave. And we kind of got a little bit into the glamour of it all, which I think is so interesting, knowing that glamoring, at least in this, isn't a full science. Like, I feel like there was, you probably stumble a little in like the Vampire Diaries universe. To be fair, like if people have vervain in their blood, you wouldn't be able to compel them either way. But at the very least, there's never been a situation of like unless you're like an amateur at it, compulsion is not that, isn't too, like, it never really failed in the Vampire Diaries universe, like I said, except for like those extenuating circumstances like vervain and stuff. So it's interesting to know that it's not a foolproof science, that wiping Sarah's mind of this kind of has trickle effects, where it's like, right, Sarah might not 100% remember how she actually feels about Reginald too because of that. But later on, Mike talks to Reginald about, like, right, the fact is it's there a little bit, so that, eventually it's that spark will return. It's not completely gone. Her memories of it are gone for now, but that's the thing for Reginald too. It's like, she doesn't remember anything. She doesn't remember the date, and talking to her made him go like, oh, she doesn't even, all those events kind of led to her because it's having like a back trickle effect of, right, wiping her memory here might have trickled back to just how she generally feels about Reginald. So, but it does seem like later on when they're talking, like, there might be something there where that it might still be there, or maybe like some little embers of that flame of like how she feels about him are there. But poor Reginald. Like, it's like vampirism. Like, I don't think we've ever seen someone stumble this hard with vampirism. I mean, I'm trying to think. God, I'm blanking on Deborah Ann Wool's character from True Blood. I'm trying to remember, wasn't it Jessica? Or is that her character's name from, because that might be her character's name from, the movie Escape Room. I don't know. I feel like it was Jessica. I mean, it's been ages since I've seen True Blood, but I don't remember her stumbling as much as like Reginald. I mean, it's like, right, once again, it's the whole thing of like, he's, once again, a fat vampire. And the fact is that he's trying to go after that lady that's jogging. Once again, it's like, right, you're only a little bit more than what you were. It's not like you got like crazy. It's like, right, if you were athletic, you're going to be even faster, but it's never going to be like some crazy amount faster. Especially because it's like, right, if you're kind of out of shape as a human, you're going to pretty much stay out of shape as a vampire. You're going to stay that way forever too. So him chasing after her and trying to speed up every time she gets away, and it's like, oh my God, I'm sweating, I'm out of breath. I was like, this sucks. Then he tries to get the other guy, and the guy's like, yo, Comic-Con's like next week, bro. Like, he's like, oh, he's like, if you're a vampire, where's your teeth? And he's trying to summon him. It's like, they don't come out when I want them to. And it's like, okay, bro. He's like, all right, I'll give you $25 for $50 for your blood, but we have to go to an ATM first. He's like, bro, I'm not doing that. Home dude handled that conversation a lot longer than I thought he would. But Reginald was like, oh, you'll listen to me. He's like, oh, it's like, you're going to break my neck or whatever. He's like, all right, bet. Punches him in the face. I was like, that sucks. I was like, 2 for 2, Reginald. It's like, that sucks so much. I've never, ever in any vampire fiction I've seen have ever seen anyone fall and fail this hard in that, for like the first outings of the vampire. I was like, that sucks, dude. And I wonder, is it because he hasn't drunk any blood? Because like, maybe it's just purely his body deteriorating because of no blood, but it did seem like his eye might have, like, there might have been some swelling, or like his eye might have been a little black from the punch. So I was like, oh, I mean, when you burned yourself from the sun, like, you healed pretty quickly in the mirror. So that sounds like your healing factor is pretty strong, or at least decent. But I mean, like I said, that could have just easily been like his body like failing because Maurice was like, yeah, you don't want to go without feeding. It won't kill you. Because once again, vampire rules, because I want to say in the Vampire Diaries, when you're in your middle of your transformation, if you don't drink blood at all, you will eventually die. So that's the choice. You could either drink and complete the transformation or don't, and you just die. I don't know if they've ever explained why that is. Maybe it's like the blood is still in your system, but it's not fully activated. It's almost like an inactive spell that brought you back from the dead, and it doesn't get fully rejuvenated until you drink. Am I confusing that? That was a Vampire Diaries. Like you had to drink or you would die. I mean, that might be other things too, but I feel like that's a Vampire Diaries thing and not a True Blood thing. I mean, it could be both. But your boy Reginald ends up chasing after his friend, who's like a regular customer of his, and he's going to like he shows off his fangs and everything, but he was like, oh, I was going to drink your blood, but I can't. He's like, I can't do this. He feels so bad about it. My immediate thought was like, dude, Todd. I mean, he jumping ahead a little bit. He does eventually get caught, but I was like, get Todd. But I'm like, that seemed like the most obvious thing. Todd is such a piece of shit, the way he talks shit about you, like, all the time. So it's like, it seemed obvious. It's like, right, you don't have to feel bad about some innocent person, but it's like still the thing of, he's an asshole, but he still doesn't deserve me drinking his blood. And it's like, because, for Reginald, it's like, I don't want to be kind of a monster, but it's like, kind of have no choice at this point in time. But explaining it to his friend, and she's just like, wait, you were going to feed him? He's like, yeah. And she's just like, but you're fat. He's like, I don't know why that's relevant and why everyone keeps like throwing that in my face. But yes, I am. I know my body issues. So, but she's like, well, you're not welcome. Get out of here. You can't, I don't like welcome you in my house. He's like, okay. And she says something and he's like, Jesus, why? Like, it was like something, she made some final remark and he's like, that was completely unnecessary. But then she sees how sad and pathetic he looks. She's like, are you okay? He's like, no. She's like, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to stay out here until the sun comes on. She's like, won't that kill you? He's like, yeah, if I'm lucky. But don't worry, like, I shouldn't make that much of a mess. You'd be able to kind of, like, power wash it off the steps or whatever. She's like, fine, come on up. Like, my mom hasn't come home yet. I could give you something to eat. And he's like, because she's like, he's like, wait, don't you have to invite me in? She's like, that's probably stupid BS that they made on, like, movies and TVs and stuff like that. It's like, what? I think she's even kind of almost being like, why would that actually be a real thing? And it's like, that's such an intricate part of vampire lore, which, once again, I'm talking about the fact is I'm watching so many vampire things at once. Currently, that being, because I know it's a big thing in the Vampire Diaries universe, you have to be invited in. Once again, I don't remember Interview with the Vampire, the movie, that well, but that has not come up in the show so far. And there's only one episode of Let the Right One In out, right? So I don't know if that has those same rules as well. It probably, I don't think it does, but I don't remember from that movie either. Either way, so that probably isn't applicable. And it's like, all right, here's the steak, which he gobbles it down. And I was like, will that actually work? It's like, no, because he even admitted, he's like, well, it's not actually blood, it's like water and all this other stuff. Because Maurice had pointed out that obviously Reginald, like every vampire, I think, has their specialty, and his is the way his mind works. He might not be like physically strong and stuff like that, but his is his like memory. Like the fact is that it's like, oh, like what is the 7th line of this particular book or whatever? And it's like, oh, he was able to recite it. It's like, oh, I was able to easily like solve math stuff. And it's like, I guess because he was already a very smart person. And once again, what does vampirism do? It just enhances what you were already. So like he was already a pretty smart dude. And I think you just add like, you add his vampirism to it. And I think it made him super intelligent. I don't know if they've ever really leaned into like super intelligent vampires. Like obviously it's like if you're very, very old, of course you pick up on stuff, and I guess if you were a smart person to begin with. But I don't think I've ever watched anything that really, really leaned into like, oh, a super, super intelligent vampire. But maybe it's not immediately clicking in my head. And I do like that because they kind of set that up at the beginning of that, partway through the episode, and now that kind of comes back a little later on about Reginald's circumstances. But Yeah, his body is deteriorating to the point his finger popped off, which I'm wondering, like, because we do see at one point he's in bed, and it's because it was like nothing before, but then you see his hand and it looks like maybe the bone is growing back, so it's like, okay, so it's like a full blown, like, what is it? Is it a lizard? I forgot what reptile it is. There's some, are lizards reptiles? Yeah, they are. I think they are. There's something like that, like a lizard. I want to say if you cut off its tail, it grows. I don't remember what it was now. I want to say it's lizard's blood. But it did seem like his finger was full blown regenerating. It's not like I gotta tape it back or get surgery. It's like, no, it's you're just gonna grow a new finger. It makes you wonder. It's like, oh, the other one's just gonna sit wherever it is and decay. I guess you just do it in the trash or something. I don't know. Not unless he did attach it, but it looked like that was like, at least from the little we saw of it, it looked like it was bone. Like I said, like it, almost like a Deadpool thing of like, the joke in Deadpool 2 with like the baby legs. It was almost kind of like that. I did think that was kind of a sweet story he ended up telling Sarah, Reginald, the whole like metaphor, like he's the ant in the situation, she's the horse. It's like, oh yeah, the ant saw this beautiful horse that he was looking at her all the time, but the horse never realized it. And it's like, oh, she was about to eat this grass that would have been poisonous to her. It would have been just like very much like eating cyanide. Goes in her nose and she runs off without eating the grass. The ant got blown and hit the tree, but it limped back to that ant hill and just waited over and over again. It's just kind of like their story. And you could almost say that's where I'm inkling like the fact is Sarah's, that spark is still there to some extent, because she was almost like, so she was kind of reading into it, but I think maybe because of where her mind is and her heart is right now, because of like her memories being messed with, she's not really fully connecting the dots that it's fully about them, but maybe she's feeling it on some level, so. But Reginald's just like, right, let's get back to work. And his friend is like, right, feed on Todd. He's like, oh, that's gross. And it's like, and then Todd immediately says like he stinks and stuff. It's like, all right, let's do this. So feeds on Todd. And I was scared. I was like, the problem is you're most likely going to end up feeding too much on Todd and end up killing him. But luckily it worked out. He was able to compel Todd, or glamour Todd. It's all the same, but still. Was able to glamour Todd and made him forget. I wondered did he also make Todd less of an asshole, because the moment Todd's like, hey, Sarah, let's get back to work, and walked away, and I'm like, oh, so maybe Reginald was like, also going forward, you're going to be nicer to me and every one of your employees. I think we're also kind of setting up the fact is that everyone that works there is a little bit of a weirdo. I think Sarah in her own regards is a weirdo, but like Reginald's other like co-worker, Ashley, they're a bit of a weirdo as well too. So it's like, what the fuck? They slapped me. What the So everything kind of worked out in the end. But we also, learned because of Maurice's circumstances, which we'll get to in a second. It does seem like the sire bond works both ways. It's not only that the maker can feel the makee. The makee can also feel the maker and tell when they're in trouble. I don't think it was ever like that in some of the fictions I can think of, that it worked that way, like the other way. I know, like in the Vampire Diaries, once again, I'm once again comparing and contrasting other vampire fictions. I do know, like it creates a complicated, because like the whole Damon and Elena thing it's like, oh, like does Elena actually have feelings for Damon, or is it just because of like this sire bond thing that they've kind of got going on? So there's that, but also like just in comparison to like the originals and what the sire bond means with the bloodlines and stuff, that whole shtick, right? So I don't know if this will ever really lean into that. I would assume not, because that would have like obviously massive implications, but that was once again a whole story point in the originals, and I think that's the only thing I know that's really ever deep dived into like the sire bond bloodline like that. But that's a very special case because it's the originals, it's the Michelsons. So, but either way, Maurice's circumstances are Angelus. Well, first and foremost, he got beat up by Isaac's brother, was it Eric? And it's like, oh, I'm Isaac. He's like, you literally gonna have to like narrow that down. I've killed a lot of Isaacs. And it's like, well, to be fair, Isaac wasn't that bad of a guy. He was surrendering, but I did end up killing him. It's like, well, he was kind of a dick. Him and the others like ended up killing your friends. So it's like, yeah. once again, like Maurice never really fully gave an explanation why he took such an interest in Reginald, but I think it's because it's like, yeah, like he saw so much of who he was, maybe a little bit of the innocence he had at one point in time, how maybe he wanted, maybe it's a similarity of we both wanted life to be different, but life kind of bitch slapped us and like didn't work out the way we wanted it to. And the fact is that his situation is specifically tied to Angela, but maybe it's also he had given the answer of because he's a hopeless romantic, and I think it kind of plays into the Angela thing. He loved Angela, but it didn't work out for many different reasons, and I think he was hoping that things between Sarah and Reginald could work out. You know, he wanted there to be some happy love story where like everything works out. Either way, Angela kind of came to pay a visit, and it seems like her and Maurice have not seen each other in a while, but the fact is she's like showing up the way she did, even in inviting him to something which he went simply for the purpose of, oh, I want to learn all there is to know about her and her world and her so I can destroy her. It's like, even with the little explanation we got like at the end of the episode, we still don't fully know what that all entails, like what went down between these two. Like hopefully we get an answer soon enough in the show, but I think it's also interesting too that they set up the whole like, oh, drinking a vampire's blood, and I don't know whether it's like, is it that Angela's blood was already dosed with something, like maybe she took something and it was already in her bloodstream, or is it just like maybe it's special powers of hers to like, because it's like, right, like the fact is like, because vampires typically don't drink other vampires' blood. I want to say it was a thing in True Blood. It was kind of a bit of a, there was, maybe it wasn't True Blood. There was some vampire fiction where I saw like them like bleeding and biting on each other while they're having sex, and it's like obviously like shit gets kind of rough in certain aspects of like some of the sex scenes and stuff in True Blood, but I wasn't expecting a full blown kind of foursome that was going on, like the scratching and bleeding and biting and just blood all over. It's kind of like you can't actually get any substances from like drinking a vampire's blood. It has to just be like a sex thing of like, oh yeah, like the sensation of draining each other's blood, and just like there's something erotic about that. I think like there's no like benefit in that it keeps a vampire alive. I think it is just purely like an erotic thing to do. I don't know. But it is sad when Maurice wakes up and is like, oh, he got like she drugged him and killed Mike. It's like, right. At first I was like, is this retaliation for what happened in the first episode, the people, the Isaac and everything? But it's like, no, it doesn't seem like it is. It seems like this goes back even further, because she talked about the fact is that he was always set on revenge, and I don't know if that was back with, like, cause I assumed that was like Black Panther stuff, but maybe it wasn't. But I don't know if the revenge is related to that or something else, because she was like, I stuck by your side even when you went home and I told you not to go home. So I guess maybe something bad happened. What the bad blood is between them, like maybe she killed his family to because she's on some very like elitist shit, because she's all, I mean, it seems like she probably sets the standard for like the vampire society. I'm curious, like, is she like the head honcho of all vampires, or is it more so like a thing of this particular sect of vampires? Like they're like cells all across the world, and each kind of have their own leaders and stuff like that. Well, to be fair, Maurice did say that there's only like maybe 100. No, God, once again, I'm confusing stuff. It's like, no, that's Interview with the Vampire I'm thinking about. There's a conversation between Lestat and Louis about how many vampires are actually out there. I was like, I don't think they've actually put that into like an actual number. At least I don't think they did in the first episode for this. Once again, that's going to be such a big issue. Like I said, because I'm watching like 2 other vampire shows currently, and because I've watched quite a few vampire shows in general, I'm going to end up conflating so much stuff of like, oh, this was from this show, when in actuality it's from this, and it's like, oh, it's going to be a whole thing. I'm going to have to try and keep a lot of that straight in my head. What show has set up what rules and which ones have established what, either way. But I'm just curious, like, what Angela's position is in the grand scheme of things. She is top dog in this particular sect, but we don't know if it's like that's all vampires in general or just this particular area. I don't even know how old Angela is either. Well, she has referenced the fact is that she's seen kind of like things kind of fall and rise. So she's kind of seen some stuff over the years. So she's definitely like well over like Maurice, but we don't know if she's like, what that necessarily means. Hundreds, thousands. Either way. But like my point was about the whole elitism to it is because it seems like she's the one that sets the standards of like, oh, Reginald, that vampire you made, he's disgusting. He did like we kind of she's almost like like a certain other group. She's all about purity when it comes to vampires. Like, oh, that I think there's interesting layers to that considering like you are who you are and also like you having like your but I guess it's like right because it's more. I mean, I think you can make an acknowledgments to certain groups that are all about purists, but it's also because it's like, right, you are a species that believes yourself to be superior. You have to be lean and slick and beautiful, and Reginald represents everything that the vampire community is not. Like I guess she wants. She has her own image of what she wants the vampire community to be, and Reginald does not fit that mold. So ends up planning on killing Maurice, but I did love that line of like, she's like, I will know the moment you die because as your maker. Luckily, Reginald felt Maurice being in trouble and showed up. And I was like, oh man, he's good. Like when Eric was trying to kill him or something, I was like, you're going to do something. I'm like, I'm not sure what it is. And he ends up compelling Eric. So that's Reginald's special power because vampires aren't supposed to be able to compel other vampires, which, once again, using, the Vampire Diaries, for example, that is mostly true except for, I want to say, Silas and the originals are the only exception to that. They can compel other vampires. At least I strongly believe Silas could. He could definitely get inside your head and stuff and make you see shit that wasn't there. But the originals definitely were able to compel other vampires. So that being very special ability that Reginald has, that I guess like no one else does. I mean, once again, maybe Angela does to some extent because of her blood, but maybe it doesn't work in the same capacity as Reginald. So, because like Maurice made it seem like vampires kind of have their unique characteristics and attributes and stuff based on kind of the person, but it seems like I'm assuming they're going to make it so that Reginald's the only one with that. It kind of reminds me, my anime nerd brain. Aside from just using like the originals, it kind of reminds me of the Will of D. In what it wasn't called, like that's where it stems from. It's the Conqueror's will in One Piece. Basically, it's not a compulsion thing. It's more like I shut you down and incapacitate you with my sheer will. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of that. But once again, the best example would be like the Michelson's compelling other vampires type of thing. Either way. A lot of interesting things, a lot of setup. It's going to be interesting to see how Maurice and Reginald find their way out of this because Angela's going to be coming after them for multitude of reasons. And I'm curious, like, is Maurice going to try and raise up a group of opposition against her? Like, how they're going to do this? We'll ultimately have to wait and see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.